Hi everyone. As we're waiting, everyone is in listen-only mode. If you have a question or concern, there is a chat box should be on your right, and you can submit questions at the end of the webinar, or you can chat to speak with one of the presenters, myself. All right, thank you. And we'll hold on for a few more minutes for folks to join us. Hi, there was a question. Folks wasn't sure if we have begun. I just wanted, one, if you can't hear me, well, I'm hoping everyone can hear me, and then if two, you can, we are going to wait for another minute, and then we can, for folks to join us, and then we'll start. Yep.
Welcome everybody to the second in our ESSA webinar series. This particular webinar is called Submitting Public Comments on the Every Student Succeeds Act, or as we like to say in a more friendly way, this is about making your comments on the new rules for school. Welcome, this is Rita Pin-Ahrens. I am Director of Education Policy at the Southeast Asia Resource Action Center, also known as CIRAC.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Justin Trinidad, and I am the Civil Rights Fellow at OCA, Asian Pacific American Advocates.
Hi, everyone. My name is Suvan Lee, and I work at CIRAC, and I work on education policy with Rita. Thank you.
All right. So first off, let us tell you a little bit about the National Council of Asian Pacific Americans, and CAPA. We're a coalition of National Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander organizations striving for equity and justice by organizing our diverse strengths to influence policy and shape public narratives. Our coalition consists of over 35 national API organizations. And we cover policy areas that include education, civil and human rights, health, housing and economic justice, and immigration. On the Education Committee, we have OCA, Asian Pacific American Advocates, CIRAC, the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, the Asian Pacific Islander American Scholarship Fund, the Japanese American Citizens League, the National Council for Native Hawaiian, and also we have a new member that is not included on this slide yet, and we apologize for that. That is the Laotian American National Alliance, LANA. So now I'm going to turn it over to Justin, who will talk to you about the importance of regulations and comments.
Hi again, everyone. So first of all, we want to answer the question, what are regulations? In summary, after congressional bills become laws, federal agencies are responsible for putting those laws into action through regulations. Regulations are guidelines from agencies designed to help implement and interpret laws passed by Congress. Think of regulations as the rules that guide the states and local governments for complying with the law. So how are regulations related to legislation? A federal agency drafts regulations in order to address any ambiguities in a law. Contrary to legislation, which is reviewed and altered by Congress, the public and interested parties may attempt to change a proposed regulation by submitting comments, which require consideration and response by the agency. In general, regulations go through a public comment period, which I'll explain a little bit more later, and agencies usually provide information on their specific procedures on the submission of comments. On this slide, I wanted to compare and contrast the difference between a sample legislation and a sample regulation. So in this slide, it is an example of an excerpt from the Every Student Succeeds Act legislation, or ESSA. And in the denoted section 1111, all public schools in the state require at least one valid, reliable, and comparable indicator of school quality or student access, and what the indicator may include. Next slide. And then on this slide is the sample regulation that corresponds to this proposed, or to this legislation. Under proposed regulation 200.14, each state must use the same measures within each indicator for all schools, and an exception regarding varying measures and indicators by grade span is further outlined in subsection C2. In summary, the legislation states that school quality indicators need to be included in the accountability plan, while the regulation outlines what the quality indicators can or cannot be. Now I want to talk about public comments responding to these regulations. As I described earlier, federal agencies develop and enforce regulations that will affect various aspects of our everyday lives. One of the most important parts of the rulemaking process is the ability of the public to participate. Submitting comments is a key way the public has input in the regulatory processes for federal agencies. So after a notice is given, the agency is required to solicit and accept public comments on the rules. The notice and comment process enables anyone to submit a comment on any part of the proposed rule. In order for agencies to incorporate public feedback, the comments must be submitted during the public comment period, which typically lasts about 60 to 90 days. What happens to your comments after you submit them? An agency must respond in a reasoned manner to the comments received, explain how the agency resolved any significant problems raised by such comments, and show how that resolution led to the agency's ultimate rule. At the end of the process, the agency must base its reasoning and conclusions on the rulemaking record, consisting of the comments in addition to the data, expert opinions, and facts accumulated during the pre-rule and proposed rule stages. To move forward with a final rule, the agency must conclude that its proposed resolution or solution will help accomplish the goals or solve the problems identified. It must also consider whether alternate solutions would be more effective or cost less. So who can provide comments? Essentially, anyone can provide comments. Any person or group may comment on a rule and can easily submit comments online by typing directly onto the Federal Register portal or uploading a document of the comments. Your comments can be brief or in-depth, and all should be well-researched. They can address specific aspects of the proposed rule, fully address all aspects, or address the subject at large. Often, the agency will ask the public to comment on specific aspects of the proposed regulation, but you may comment on any part or the whole regulation.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Now I'm going to talk about the current proposed regulations for ESSA, or as we said, the new school rules. So first I want to give an overview of what current regulations are available. The first is proposed regulations on accountability, state plans, and data reporting. The comments on these are due August 1st of 2016. I've provided the docket ID number, which is how you can search for the regulation on the federal website, as well as the docket information that you have to provide when you are submitting your comments. I've also included resources from the U.S. Department of Education here. This website will give you a summary of the regulations, the full text of the regulations, which can be quite complex and long, as well as a chart comparing the proposed regulations to the old No Child Left Behind law. All right. Now for a quick overview of accountability. In the Every Student Succeeds Act, accountability has changed. But first, we want to go over what is accountability. This is the idea of holding states, districts, and schools responsible for how well students do in school. Under ESSA, schools are given a summative rating. This can be numeric, or it can be a report-style grade, that is an A through F grade. And schools are identified for improvement using a variety of criteria and a variety of indicators. This is different from the No Child Left Behind law, which only had one criteria. The performance of subgroups of students matters in the state accountability system. And once schools are identified, schools and districts must provide supports and interventions to close the achievement gaps that are found. So what are the new proposed accountability rules? The accountability rules cover the 4 different indicators that are used for identifying schools needed for improvement. Previously, under No Child Left Behind, only math and reading language arts test scores were used to identify schools. The 4 indicators that are being used now are test scores in math and reading, graduation rates for high schools, or if you're in an elementary and middle school, the state determines a different academic indicator, which must be the same across the state. English language proficiency rates is the 3rd indicator, and the 4th indicator is a school quality measure. These 4 indicators are important new pieces of the ESSA law, and you are able to comment on what you think the indicators should look like in terms of restrictions, or whether you support the use of these indicators, or whether you do not support the use of these indicators. In terms of goals, the proposed accountability rules note that these goals are state-determined instead of federal, and they need to take into account the need to accelerate growth for students who are further behind. Within the proposed accountability rules, you will see further guidelines for how the states must establish the goals. The same is true for state-determined timelines. You can also comment for how you believe states should determine what timeline students should be proficient in math and language arts. Next, I want to go over data reporting within ESSA. Within ESSA, states, districts, and schools must release data on subgroups of students. This is similar to No Child Left Behind in that data has to be provided for students of color, students from low-income families, students with disabilities, and English language learners. Similar to No Child Left Behind, states and districts must provide this data in a report card format. However, the proposed regulations also include a proposed rule that the minimum number of students that can be used for reporting is 30, which is a shift from current law, which allows states to set their own what we call N size. So what are the rules for state report cards? The current rules that are proposed say that state report cards should have an overview. This overview should be found on the State Department of Education website, and within the overview you should be able to very quickly tell what kind of data can be found in the state's accountability system, and that data should include race, disability, English proficiency, and economic status. The state may also have other data depending on how they structure their accountability plan. Also on the state website, there should be a link to each of the local education agencies' report cards, which local education agencies, LEAs, are also known as school districts. And the State Department of Education website should also include which districts need improvement. All of the data for each school and district must be made available by December 31st of the following year. So for the academic school year of 2016 and 17, your data would be available in December of 2018. So the proposed rules for district report cards within the district report card overview must include the data of student performance by the major subgroups that we've named before: students of color, low-income students, English language learners, and students with disabilities. It also needs to show how the district compares to the state average. It also needs to show how schools within the district compare to each other as well as the state average. The LEA report card should also give a summative rating for each school so that you can easily compare schools. In addition, it should tell you whether an individual school has been identified for improvement. These district report cards must be sent to parents either through email if they've indicated they would like to receive the parent notification that way, or through mail. Please note that all of this information must be provided to parents in, to the extent practicable, a language that they can understand, or if it's not practicable, it must, the school or district must provide language access to the parents. And again, with the same with the state data report cards, all this data must be made available by December 31st of the following year. Quickly on assessments. The regulations for assessments was released last week. The comments are due September 9th, 2016. I provided the docket ID as well as a link to receive a full summary of the regulations as well as the full text of the regulations. To give you a quick overview of what assessments look like in ESSA and what the regulations contain, we have, just like in No Child Left Behind, there are annual assessments in math and reading language arts in grades 3 through 8 and once in high school. That has not changed from No Child Left Behind. The new proposed regulations, however, provide more guidance on how alternative assessments for students with disabilities should look, including a 1% cap on students with the most severe cognitive disabilities. New to ESSA is that there is also a 95% participation rate for all students to take the assessments within the states, and this applies not only to all students but within each subgroup of students. Also, new aspects of the law include that districts can select a nationally recognized assessment that they can use across the district instead of the state assessment for language arts or math. This might include AP courses, AP assessments, or the ACT or SAT. You can comment specifically on this portion of the regulations as it is a new section of ESSA. In addition, a new part of ESSA is that states can now receive technical assistance for developing assessments in a language other than English. The regulations cover how the state identifies which languages are considered important within the state and which languages they will receive technical assistance for developing these regulations in. We welcome you to provide comments on this particular piece of the regulations as well. And now I'm going to turn it over to Suvan to give you an example of a sample regulation and a comment. He'll also walk you through the process.
Thank you, Rita. Hey, everyone. So when Congress passed the new federal education law in December of last year, there were still some questions and some issues they needed to resolve. So as part of this effort, they have given notices of rules that they have proposed and rules and regulations. So one of these that we've identified here for all of you is on parent notification for schools that need improvement. In this proposed rule, it would require that each state notify any local education agency, so that's like your school district. And if they serve a school identified, a school that has been identified for improvement, then they also need to, it requires that each state notify those school districts that have been, that have schools that are identified for improvement, and then that the school districts also notify parents who have students enrolled in these schools. And so part of this notice also needs to be in an understandable and uniform format. It needs to be, to the extent practicable, written in a language that parents can understand, and if it's not practicable to provide a written translation, then it needs to be orally translated for parents. So this is one of your rights. In addition, we didn't note this here in the slide, but parents who have students with disabilities, as defined in the Americans with Disabilities Act, they also need to be provided this notice in an alternative format. Okay? So, before we move on, so one of a sample comment that you could possibly make, right, is to ask that every written document in English that is sent to parents should also include information on how parents can request free language assistance. So we want to emphasize both free and both language assistance from the school district or the school itself. You shouldn't have to bring your own translator, shouldn't have to pay for it, and yeah, it should definitely be in a format that you can access. Okay, so how do we access this kind of information so that we can provide these public comments and input? There's a website called the Federal Register. In the slide, I've listed the link to the website, and federalregister.gov. And then in this next slide, so I have a screenshot. So this is what, if you go to the website, this is what the Federal Register website looks like. As you can see, my screenshot was from yesterday, Tuesday, July 12th. So every day they update that date so that you know all of these proposed rules are current. And then when you're on their website, when you scroll down, you're going to see, I wanted to highlight here on the left here, it says what's in the Federal Register. So you'll see options for notices, proposed rules, final rules, and presidential documents. So this is a way for you to search for all of these proposed rules. So typically what happens is a notice goes out before to let people know that this is what the federal agency is going to do. So you can find those notices ahead of time. And then once, once the process for an open comment period starts, they're going to be listed in the proposed rules. So, so if you click on the proposed rules, this is the screen that is going to come up. So there's a lot of things here. So one, I think the first thing is you can search for key terms, search for statutes, or search for what you want to find in that general search box at the top. On the left-hand side, you also see listed agency, and then so they list a number of federal agencies, and then they also list a number next to them. So those numbers are the notices, are our public proposed rules, how many proposed rules there are. And then there's an option to search for more agencies in the drop-down menu. Okay, and so for us, this the example regulation I was talking about earlier was a proposed rule from the Department of Education. So if you click on that link that said more, you scroll down, you'll see an option to click on the Department of Education, and when you click on that, all of the proposed rules for the Department of Education will show up. One last thing I wanted to note is on the top right, there is an option to subscribe. So when you click on that, you can have your email subscribe to all of these, or to certain agencies or certain keywords, so that you automatically get notices when they come out. The last thing, once you submit all of this information, where can you find all of this stuff? So CRAC in the past has submitted public comments before, so I wanted to show you some of those screenshots. So you can go to the website regulations.gov. So there's a few things here. So on regulations.gov, there's a search option, so you can search keywords, your organization, or search for the public proposed rule keywords. And so here you will see that this is listed as a comment on FR Doc number 2014-28218. And then you'll see that our comment was see attached files, and then we have attached files. So so then a few things here, right? You can, when you submit the comment, you can provide all the information in that comment, and you can also provide attached documents. For us, we chose to not make we chose to just upload a full 2-3 page document as an attachment and ask them to see that. So that still counts as a public comment. And then in the next slide, you will also see, so here is some of the information that you're going to find when you see the proposed rules. There's a tracking number, there's an ID number, there's an RIN number. So this is all the really technical information that if you ever need to go back and find what you submitted or what somebody else submitted, you can type that into the search box for the regulations.gov website, and you'll find it. And then the last thing is some screenshots of what we did. So we'll provide, one, everything that's submitted on regulations.gov is publicly accessible. So this is the document that we just talked about that CRAC attached in our public comments. This was about the teacher preparation policies. So one will make this document available to you as well, or you can search for it on regulations.gov. And so this was the basic format that we had. Addressing it to the secretary, having also the ID number so that the department can reference what proposed rule we were talking about. And then, we provided some context, and then in the next, we just sort of listed out some of the issues that we found. You can cite the sections like we did, the sections, but you don't have to. And so we just went through, some of the things that we think are good and some things that we think should change. So that really quickly is one, how to submit public comments, how to find it, and some sort of a template for how we did it.
Great, thank you, Suvan. I'm going to talk just really briefly about some resources that we've included in this slide. First, if you did not get a chance to watch our first webinar on ESSA, we provided a link to the YouTube video. This particular webinar talks about the Every Student Succeeds Act in more detail, going over the overview, the history of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and how the Every Student Succeeds Act differs from No Child Left Behind, as well as how it's relevant to the API communities. So we talk specifically about English language learners, we talk about meaningful engagement of our communities, and also about API data disaggregation within ESSA. And then I've also included specific links to the Department of Education's page on the Every Student Succeeds Act so that you can look for yourself for the official documents that provide an overview, PowerPoints, and some recorded webinars on ESSA. And in addition, I've also linked 2 PDFs that give an overview of both the accountability regulations as well as the regulations for state plans and data reporting. I want to just note for everybody that we will be providing recommendations, templates, and sample comments about the state data reporting as well as the accountability regulations that are due August 1st. These templates will be available between July 25th and 29th. I apologize that they are not available sooner, but our team here is going through the very extensive regulations right now and fine-tuning those comments. Please send an email to education@craf.org with the subject sample ESSA comments, and we'll put you on a list to receive a link to our comments and templates. Now I'm going to open it up to questions.
Yep, and we're going to spend a few minutes here letting people submit questions. So right now everyone is on listen-only mode, but on your computer screens you should have a control panel where there are 2 options. There's a chat option and there's a question option. And so feel free to submit questions and chat questions via the chat option or via the question option there, and we'll have some, we'll try our best to answer these questions. Thanks everybody. So wait a few minutes here. All right. Thanks, everyone. So we have one question here. How much impact have we seen from the comments people submitted in the past? And how do we know if anyone is listening to our public comments?
So I think this is a great question. I know that we have seen impact from our comments, not specifically from the regulations process per se that I can point to, but we know that in sessions where public comments have been taken, the department has certainly incorporated them. So for example, the comments that, or the regulation that we showed you as an example, the parent notification regulation was actually, that stems from a comment that was made that parents really, not only parents, but school districts really did not know that they were supposed to provide, at a minimum, oral translation to parents. And so the department took that comment from a different meeting and incorporated them into the regulations that you see now. I hope that answers the question.
And so the next question is, does the agency need a certain amount of comments talking about the same topic in order to bring some momentum?
So there is not a minimum number of comments that need to be provided on a particular topic for the department to take notice. The department has to review every comment. If they receive comments that are identical in nature, they actually do have software that will sort that out, and that will be seen as one comment, and they'll have a note that it was submitted by a certain number of people. What's more important is actually the rationale you provide for your comment. So if you say that, you know, a comment, or if you note that you would like the notices that are sent to parents to include information on language assistance, it would be helpful to give an example of how there hasn't been compliance by schools and districts in the past, what your experience with this issue has been, because the department is looking for compelling reasons for why they should include something within the regulations.
I think on another strategic point too, I think it's also, I think we should, safe to assume that other people will be submitting comments, and that you know, other people may submit comments, probably will submit comments that are not helpful for our communities. And so I think we also need to make sure that, you know, those comments are there so that we flag it for the department to know, and that we make sure that we're holding them accountable, that, you know, they can't say that, you know, they didn't know. It's that, you know, we want to make sure that they know and that we can hold them accountable to it.
Right, and it's important also to provide positive comments for things that you find helpful in the new regulations, as well as some suggestions for what you might change. Okay, this is going to be the last call for questions. We're going to give you another minute.
All right, I think that's the last of the questions. One more thing that I didn't cover in the webinar was that the notice for proposed rules are also available in alternative formats, whether that's in a different language or for folks that have disabilities. And so if you, that information is on the website as well. And if you would like some help finding that, please send us an email.
All right, and on behalf of the NCAPA Education Committee, I just want to thank you for attending our webinar on helping define and make the school rules for new school rules. Please contact us at education@cirac.org or Rita@cirac.org, Suvan@cirac.org, and jtrinidad@ocanational.org. Thank you and have a great day.